I didn't know how to use a camera. I didn't have a camera, but you don't necessarily need all of the expensive equipment to make it happen.
You are listening to Talk Doc to Me, a podcast and community dedicated to helping documentary filmmakers thrive. I'm your host and fellow filmmaker, Leah DeLeon, and today's guest is Devon Blackwell. Devon Blackwell is a director and editor. She is a Sundance Ignite Fellow and currently getting her master's degree in documentary filmmaking from Stanford University. She started her career as a filmmaker and curator at The New Yorker, where she produced Nina and Irena. She was also named in the 2024 Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Lastly, her recent film, Goodbye Morganza, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival, receiving a special jury mention in the short documentary category. Today, we will be discussing how to navigate the documentary job landscape, how working at The New Yorker shaped her own filmmaking, and how to thoughtfully use archival materials in your documentary. Welcome, Devon.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited to chat with you. And I want to start with before you got a job at The New Yorker. So I just want to paint a picture for everyone listening. What was your life like when you were searching for a job as a documentary filmmaker?
Right. I went to the New School for undergrad, and I was studying journalism, and I thought that I wanted to become a fashion writer. But then I quickly realized I'm not necessarily into fashion. I'm just into clothes. And those are two very different things, I came to realize. But it wasn't until my sophomore year that I started kind of working with video, with editing. My first film class was an editing class at the school. So that's kind of how I got my entry. And from there, I kind of just started taking more and more production classes. I found that I really liked making video. And then while I was in school, the pandemic hit. So when the pandemic hit, that's when I started really making the films I was proud of and wanted to show people, which is kind of ironic because I was kind of locked in my...
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was locked in my little room.
Inward.
Exactly. That's exactly what I did. I started making kind of little essay films. And personal essay films were something I was really drawn to within the documentary short film space. So I kind of just started, channeling my own, inner writer to do so. And then post-graduation, I was kind of just working on, little social videos for a magazine. From there, I was working a fashion gig and then a brief stint of unemployment. And then a year after I graduated, I got the gig at The New Yorker through one of my professors at the New School, which was a dream come true. I was very lucky to have gotten that opportunity. But it just goes to show that reaching out to your professors religiously is necessary post-graduation.
How many times did you have to follow up, do you think?
I emailed quarterly, I feel like. It wasn't too often, but I would just email hey, I'm still doing this. Totally. I'm still unemployed. Or I'm working on this right now. It was pretty much the same update every time. There wasn't much going on. But, kept me in mind.
Smart. Every quarter is smart because there's different opportunities that might pop up. People are just busy in general. And so everyone, it's not even a matter of reaching out to new people every time. I actually feel prioritizing the relationships that you already have and then just setting a reminder for yourself every quarter to do exactly what you said. Hey, I'm still here. I'm writing documentaries. You let me know if you need anything. And I feel like that could always, just you being top of mind definitely always helps.
Totally.
Okay, awesome. So then you're at The New Yorker, and what was your first day like? And what was the title that you came into The New Yorker?
Right. Well, I came in freelance because the editor that was full-time on staff was going on paternity leave. So they just needed a little extra help. And then during my time there, I was told that I would be brought on full-time as an associate producer. But my first day, we weren't in the office again yet post-pandemic. So we were still working remotely. So I met everybody on the team. It was a very small team. I think it was 5 people. So it was very intimate, but I was so nervous. I was, like I was basically freshly post-grad, and it was my first like big girl job. So I felt like the imposter syndrome. I felt the nerves. But everybody was super nice and super understanding of the fact that I was, pretty fresh, pretty green in the documentary space. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking, but it was also very exciting. It was exactly the work that I wanted to do. So it was kind of, I had to like pinch myself throughout the day as I was in like in One World Trade, where the office is.
And for everyone listening, The New Yorker, I checked this morning, they have over 160 documentaries out on YouTube, and several of them have been Academy Award nominations. So including Stranger at the Gate, The Barber of Little Rock, and your film that was Oscar qualified, Nina and Irena. Can you tell me how that project came to be inside of The New Yorker?
Yeah, well, the director, Daniel Lombroso, who's a good friend of mine, he was my coworker, and he was the guy on the team who was, making the majority of the original films. And he's been wanting to do this film about his grandma, who was a Holocaust survivor for a while now. And we just happened to have the opportunity to do so at the New Yorker. We kind of made, I think, like 2 to 3 original documentaries a year. So yeah, it kind of just came together super naturally. We started the film right around the time of her 90th birthday. So that's when that was actually the first scene that we shot for the film. So it was a great way to meet the family and everything. And, like shooting with family members, it can be, easy, but it can also be like very, very difficult, just because you have to corral your family members. And that can be, a journey in itself. But, it was a thing of him helping me on my grandma film and then me helping him on his grandma film. So it was just grandmas all around for like a summer. But yeah, it kind of just came together super naturally. Daniel and his grandma had a wonderful relationship, and she's such a natural on camera. And yeah, it was just very therapeutic for all of us, I think, to kind of, talk about family history and what it means for future generations.
Mm-hmm. And working on that film in particular, what did you feel like you learned from that experience that maybe you put into your next film, Goodbye Morganza?
Mm-hmm. I think the major takeaway was, just like production know-how. I think just like how to go about starting the development of a film and going into making it. At the New Yorker, we had to make the films within a timeline. We kind of made them pretty quickly. So
how quickly? What was like start to finish?
So we like shot and edited them in less than a year. I think Nina and Irena, we started at the beginning of June, and then, we submitted it to its first festival end of September. And then, from there, we edited it here and there. And I think, by the end of the year it was locked. But I think like 6 months at least for a film at the New Yorker, which is pretty quick turnaround now that I'm like outside of that news space and I'm like, making things independently. It's a way different timeline, especially like having to like raise money and all that stuff I'm learning how to do now. But yeah, I think like the biggest thing, it was my first time working on like with a crew. We worked on an Arri Alexa, and that was crazy. So I was just like kind of in awe by all of the equipment. Victoria Campbell, who was the cinematographer on the project, she was fantastic, and she had all these different tricks for lighting to make the lighting like a golden sun glow through the window. And yeah, it was just really, really informative. And then working with Nina, it kind of just taught me, how to go about interviewing, about all these different things that I felt like I kind of had skipped in school by jumping right into work. So I feel like it was a huge crash course because it was the first thing I worked on when I was at post-pandemic.
In person, getting to see everything.
Right.
Yourself.
Yeah. Exactly.
And at the New Yorker, what was like the most surprising thing? Because I think a lot of maybe like independent filmmakers or people that are like, oh, it would be so nice to be at the New Yorker. I don't know. Like, it's sort of like a cloud for a lot of people. Like, you don't understand like how films get chosen or like how the originals get made. What was the most surprising thing being on the inside?
I think everything was surprising to me because I realized I didn't know anything about the film world. Like, I didn't even know what festivals were before I started working at the New Yorker, and that you had to submit them, and then that's how like things got qualified for the Oscars. There's a whole process to these things. And then like the acquisition model was something that was super like, fascinating to me because I would watch these, documentaries in college and high school, and I thought that all of them were made by the people at the company, but the majority of what we published was acquired. And, I think we had the opportunity to, talk with all of the different documentary filmmakers to understand, like the reasoning behind all of their projects and why they made the film. And it was just like super informative in that way. And I learned so much from those filmmakers just through those short conversations. But, we were publishing one documentary a week. So it was very quick paced, lots of reviewing processes. So,
the review process like, was it just like, you guys have your portal and your team basically watches it, gives notes, gives a rating, and then we all discuss, and probably there has to be a level of curation, know? So I'm sure that it's sort of like you need to check certain boxes of like, well, we can't have like 2 fighter films, or, oh, we can't have, I don't know, there's like different things that you might want to discuss. Like how did you balance that like in curating a documentary a week? What were some of those like discussions that you guys had internally?
Right. I feel like, well, we had at least two people watch each of the films before it goes to our EP, who then reviews it and gives the final say. But yeah, we have like different benchmarks that we wanted to hit. If it was surrounding like a specific month, like a Pride Month, we would typically program, LGBTQIA plus films during that time. And, we tried not to be too, we tried not to be too attached to like specific holidays and dates, but that's just kind of how curation pans out, once you start getting into it. But yeah, we just kind of assessed whether it was in line with the magazine, which is like kind of hard to explain because we were kind of just going based off of vibe. And it's kind of hard to say that we weren't going based off of our own personal likes and dislikes because, it's really hard to be unbiased in this case. But for the most part, it was based off of, what the film made us feel, how we thought it would go with the rest of our films in the catalog. It was a lot of, I wouldn't say arguments, but a lot of like passionate discussions if somebody liked the film and somebody else didn't. There was enough space for us to kind of decide whether, we would want to put something within the program. So yeah, it was very diplomatic in the way that we curated things.
I have this like visual of like two people arguing, being like, no, I like this film. No, but I think this one we should have. And it's just like this back and forth type of situation.
That's basically what it was.
Yeah, let's to visualize. What kind of questions do you think filmmakers should be asking themselves if they want to see their documentary on the New Yorker? Like, what are some of those like major call outs that you think would be helpful to know? Like if someone's thinking about trying to get on the New Yorker.
Right. Well, I think one of the major things that I looked for with a film was like if it was genuine or not. And I feel like you can always tell if a film is genuine or if it's, made for specific awards polls. I feel like there's like a specific conversation going around in the documentary space right now with like very glossy kind of advertisement heavy films that are, meant for, I don't know how to say this.
They kind of toe the line. They toe the line of like, is this branded or is it
right?
Like an original
exactly.
story? It's sort of, I don't know, there's a lot of celebrity docs. There's a lot of, any celebrity can just say, hey, I'm the executive producer. I'm going to fund my own documentary. And I think that's a very interesting, that's kind of the same thing that I feel like you're talking about, where it's like, okay, there's this like weird, like glossy effect, I think is a good way of putting it, of like, okay, is there a real story here? Or is it just because this person has a large audience and people want to just like watch them?
Right. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at all, because, it's just the direction that documentary is going. And I don't know, I just feel like that passion for whatever topic you're covering is very much so seen by whoever is reviewing it for publication. And those are the types of films that I always kind of gravitated towards. And through those conversations with filmmakers, you can definitely see that they are passionate about a certain topic, or they're very connected to a certain topic. Not that that's always necessary, but I don't know. I think just like stepping back and then asking yourself, why am I making this film? What is this particular goal that I'm setting out to complete? And, it's just having those conversations with yourself. I feel like documentary is already such a tricky space in terms of like how ethical it can be. So, just making sure that you're mindful when making something, because how it's received is very important.
Yeah. And going back to the idea of acquisitions in general, just for someone that maybe has never even heard that term before, how do you define acquisition, and how did that relationship work at the New Yorker?
Right. So any acquisition was a film that was submitted or that we scouted at a festival. So it would either be submitted through the New Yorker portal, or we had kind of an acquisition team at Condé Nast who would send us things, or we would get sent things personally, and they would be paid a small fee, and then we would publish it at the website. And it would usually be like a year or so before it was published, because a lot of people would submit, and during that time they would still be on their festival run. So we would let them finish and complete that, and then it would be published with at a date that was like, agreed upon with the filmmaker. But yeah, that was kind of the process. But it's any film that's submitted to us, and then all of the originals were the films that we would make in-house.
Is there anything else about your time at the New Yorker that you feel like would be helpful for emerging filmmakers to know from your experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the imposter syndrome is like the main thing that people talk about and experience, especially when they're going into like a big space like at the New Yorker, or like a magazine space. And I think like it doesn't necessarily go away, which is upsetting. And like, regardless of what you do next, it's always going to be, am I supposed to be here? Unless you're like super confident, then good on you. But I personally experienced a ton of that, and just a lot of self-doubt. And I think that is like incredibly normal, especially early in your career. And I think just like giving yourself grace, I feel like I was incredibly fortunate to get this opportunity at the New Yorker. And I feel like there's a habit, an innately human habit, to compare yourself to people that are similar ages to you, that are doing specific things that you don't feel like you're doing. And I feel like it just all comes in due time. In college, I was super insecure about the fact that I never had an internship like my other classmates. And, it's just like that stuff is very surface level. It doesn't matter. So the comparison, it's really just like a time sink, but it's going to happen. It's there's no way to avoid it. But I think
I appreciate you saying that, because reading your bio, it's like, wow, okay, like Forbes 30 under 30,
oh my God,
like Sundance Fellow, Tribeca. And I think it's a very good point to say, like, comparison is just poison. Like, it's just, no matter what your journey is, you just really can't compare it to someone else, because that's not your life. Like, that's not the projects that you worked on. That's not the school that you went to or didn't go to. Like, it truly just doesn't make any sense to compare ourselves. And yet it's human nature. So I think it's really it's nice to just talk that out, because some people might be like, oh my gosh, well, she has it like all figured out. Like, that's amazing. And then to hear like nobody has their stuff together. Nobody knows. Everyone's just doing their best. So I appreciate that sentiment. I think a lot of people need to hear that. So.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult, especially with younger people. It's it's gonna happen, but you push through it. Everything happens on your timeline. Other people's timeline, completely irrelevant compared to your own.
I need that on a sticky note. Okay. So I want to talk about how you got Forbes 30 under 30. I will say for myself, I would love to be like Forbes 30 under 30. There's just like something about it that everyone is like, wow, like before you're 30, like make it on this list. And it's like this elusive list. Like, can you just tell us how did you get on 30 under 30? And tell us that story.
Right. It's a very simple process, actually. I didn't realize either, because it seems so elusive, like you said. You know, you see all the different, like, oh wow, like Issa Rae, 30 under 30. It's so cool. But how it happened, you have to be recommended by somebody who was Forbes 30 under 30. So Daniel Lombroso, the director of Nina and Irena, and my old coworker, super great guy. He recommended me to the Forbes people because they asked for, like suggestions from like alumni. And then when I was at the New Yorker, they like also submitted my name. But it's just like a little tiny, form that you fill out.
So what you're saying is, now that I know you, okay, now I'm connecting all the dots. So everybody, hot tip, go to the Forbes 30 under 30 list, make some friends, keep in touch with them, send them quarterly emails, keep working on your stuff. That's what I'm hearing here. Okay, I like this.
Exactly. But when I submitted it, I was just like, no way, I haven't done anything. But, I woke up one morning and there the email was, and that's what it was. It was a very strange whirlwind of a week entirely, but
yeah, tell me about that week, because that I would say is like a high, and then tell me how that week ended.
Okay, yeah, so it was the epic highs and lows of documentary film. But I had gotten Forbes 30 under 30. So on Tuesday, I got the Forbes 30 under 30, which was super exciting. And then on Thursday, I got laid off along with two of my other coworkers. And yeah, it was, it was very humbling, to say the least.
What was that, hearing that news, like, what, like, and then like the week that follows that, how did you cope with, what do I do next? Like, I thought I had this stable job. I don't all of a sudden. What do I do now?
Right. Well, I knew that Condé was going through a round of layoffs, and they told us that they were going to be laying off a specific percentage of video teams across all magazines. But in my head, I was like, there's no way they're going to get rid of New Yorker Documentary. We're doing so well. Like we went to the Oscars last year. There's, like this huge demand for short documentary. But then, that was not the case. It was very heartbreaking. I cried a lot, which is, it happens. I cried for like 2 weeks straight, but then, you bounce back. I heard about the layoffs, and then I immediately applied for grad school. Because
a good coping mechanism, right? Like, okay, if this isn't going to work out, like, here's another.
Yeah, I did a hard pivot to the next thing. And, I thought, it was kind of a spur of the moment application. So I didn't necessarily think that I was going to get into grad school, but it worked out. But it was a hard pivot. So I think right after the layoffs, I, was kind of seeing red. And because I was, applying to different things, I didn't necessarily have the chance to let it sink in. But then once the applications were submitted, I kind of just like sat in my sadness for a little bit which is you need to do it. You need to, you need to let yourself, consider what just happened and give yourself time to bounce back. And I
What's a
don't
good
think
cry song? Did you cry to any songs?
so. This is like such an unpopular opinion. My cry song is "Hey Jude."
Oh wow. Okay. Okay, I can see it. I mean, why not? Why not?
It's been "Hey Jude" since high school for some reason, and I think like the na 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 na, like that chorus, for some
Mm.
reason, I just like start sobbing. So I was just listening to that on repeat.
Wow, I'm so glad you had a cry song. I like wasn't sure if that was going to resonate with you, so I'm very glad.
Oh yeah,
Now I'm getting the full picture. And I think it's so relatable. Like I remember seeing the headlines of participant media going under. I just had a phone call with someone that was at the Los Angeles short docs, and they won a freaking Oscar, and they still had layoffs. I mean, I think all across the board things are just like shrinking, and you have to be adaptable. You have to kind of fight tooth and nail to be a part of this industry, which I don't necessarily love. I think it's really tough, but another piece of advice that I feel like I've been getting from other established documentary filmmakers is you just got to keep holding on. Like it's kind of a endurance game of, if you actually love this industry, like you just need to kind of stick it out. And
right.
there will be ebbs and flows in the industry, but also in your own career path. And so how can you just sustain yourself? How can you not get burnt out? How can you not taking all the rejection as, the end of the world, and instead, taking up new opportunities? So
Totally.
I think your story is very important to share, because I think a lot of people have gone through it in the last 2 years, especially.
Totally. Yeah, it's like so easy to get. I feel like it's so easy to lose joy within the filmmaking industry, and I feel like I have been fortunate enough to like re-find my passion within the space, even after, the layoffs and everything. And then just like kind of the stress of working at a corporation, it's very easy to like kind of lose yourself as a filmmaker in those spaces. Just like kind of finding, I feel like I started making like little collage films like I did in college again, to like reignite, when I first started making films, like what I started to enjoy, a few years ago. So it was little things like that where I was like rediscovering hobbies and rediscovering, DIY filmmaking without a budget. It's stuff like that that kind of regrounds you and like kind of takes you away from all of the fluff of the film space, which I feel like can be super exhausting. So just like finding time to have fun with it again has been super important to me within the past year.
I love that. Yeah, kind of going back to our old films. Like, what did the first little videos that you made, were they, skate, like with your friend kind of films? Were they comedy films? Were they just interviewing people? Or in your case, like little collage films? Like what kind of films maybe were you drawn to in the beginning, and then kind of going back to it? I think that's a good point. I made a lot of weird YouTube videos. I feel like a lot of doc filmmakers probably were.
Yeah.
Made a lot of Taylor Swift music videos that were so bad.
Oh, lovely. We
will never show those. I don't even do music videos. I don't know why, but I mean, I was in a video. I don't know. It worked.
It was your entry. It was your entry into it. It was like that or vlogs. And
there's a phase of that too. Travel abroad. I had my little, I have like this one YouTube video that's like 20 minutes long. Don't know why anyone would sit through 20 minutes of this. Me going through every single detail of my Paris apartment. And I'm like,
lovely.
Or does everyone need to see what's in my cupboard? Like, I'm not sure.
It's the demand.
Switching gears. Our final topic that I would love to talk to you about is archival. So archival materials in general. So let's just like umbrella term, like what is archival? And in our own experience, maybe let's talk about how we've seen it used in documentaries that we've worked on.
Right. Well, I started with documentary filmmaking with an archive class in college, and it was my favorite class in the world. It like opened up a whole new world of filmmaking for me, just because I don't label myself as any type of cinematographer whatsoever. So filmmaking still kind of felt inaccessible to me. I didn't know how to use a camera. I didn't have a camera. Or I had a camera, but I didn't know how to make things look good. Um, and it was also during the pandemic that I started really working with archive. So it wasn't an option to go out and shoot things. So archive just it was all in front of you. You can craft the world that you're thinking of with found footage. And that was just such a heartwarming experience to have as like an early filmmaker, to know that you can make beautiful things, but you don't necessarily need all of the expensive equipment to make it happen. So, it's like tricky to work with archive if you're going to eventually push this film for publication, because there's a lot of like clearances that are required. There's a lot of licensing that can get expensive. And that's when archive starts to become a little inaccessible. So, but I think with like beginner filmmakers, just working with that footage, not necessarily with the hopes of sending it anywhere, but just to get the practice of making a story and crafting footage, um, to, bring your vision to life, is just such a great exercise.
Yeah.
And
I noticed some of the films that you worked on are very like personal and very like family archival heavy. And I too worked on something like just going deep into my own family roots. And I feel like it's such a natural progression to just be curious about where you come from. And it's also very accessible for people to just look at old family photos or, anything that could be laying around the house. What kind of advice do you have for people that are maybe doing a family documentary that want to highlight old family photos or newspaper clippings or things like that? How do you have this box now? How do you transform that into something that can be in a film?
Yeah, I think there's like so many different ways that you can go about piecing it all together. If you have all of these things, how do you connect them into like a cohesive string? So you could like what I did. I recorded a phone interview with my grandma with like a tape-a-call app, and that was how everything was kind of linked together. Or I would write essays, and I would write the essay based off of the material I found. So it was a lot of scanning, and it was a lot of,
Like a real scanner, or like did you have any other like tools that you used that you felt like was helpful?
I had a real scanner because I bought a scanner with my unemployment during during the pandemic.
Nice.
And that's on stimulus. So that was super helpful. But like you can use your phone and stuff. There's a lot of like different scanning apps. Well,
I've used Google Scan. I don't know if it's changed its name, but I've used that a ton, and it is actually incredible what it can do when it's like, I don't know, you worry about like glare or something, or like if there's even like a fingerprint, or just like if it's not positioned in the right way or in the best lighting, and it still actually does a great job of it. So I
exactly. It's so helpful. It's so helpful. But I feel like it can be overwhelming when you're working with so much material. So I think just like laying it out, talking to your family members to figure out like what the through line with all of this is. Like my film Goodbye Morganza, I made it as a thesis film initially, and then I remade it when I was at the New Yorker. So it was based off of a lot of the archive that I worked through with my grandma. It was based off of a phone call we had, and then it just like kind of grew into more and more. When we started talking about it, it's just like you find out so many different things from your family members just by asking a few questions. There's a lot of like so much lore hidden.
Everyone, go call your grandma, go call your grandpa, go ask
Exactly.
a question. Ask them if you can record the phone call. You might use it for your documentary later.
Exactly. Or even like if it's not necessarily a family member you want to talk to, like I did an archive film about me and my dislike of birthdays at the time. I've grown past that. But it was just a scanning of all of my different photos from like my birthday parties growing up. And then I wrote an essay to go along with it. And then I did a voiceover. So it's just like there's a lot of workarounds. You don't necessarily need to have anybody else to rely on for a story. You can just look inward and find it for yourself and just make it a very personal and, vulnerable experience for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, thinking about how we close this, what are there any tools or mantras or I don't know, small things that maybe aren't the obvious that you feel like has helped you in your career as a documentary filmmaker? This could be literally like a quote that you say to yourself, or a movie that's really inspired you, or an app on your phone, or I don't know if you meditate, or it literally could be anything. Like what are some of those things that you felt like has helped you sustain this career?
Right. Well, I feel like with filmmaking, especially if like you're working freelance or you're an independent filmmaker, it's really easy to fall into the habit of working all the time. And that's something I really have to break out of. So I also felt bad about not necessarily watching a ton of documentary films all the time. But I think that's perfectly fine. Like watch your reality TV. Watch all of your like silly little TV shows. Like I think
Or it's like cartoons. Sometimes I
exactly
cartoons and I'm like, I have no interest in like animation. I don't want to know how they did this. Like I put on Rick and Morty and I'm like, nice. I'm
perfect. Put on your Adventure Time. It's just like
yeah.
And I feel like those moments are like when I get a lot of my ideas, when I'm like turning my brain off. So I've gotten very comfortable with turning my brain off. And that is like, it's a survival technique for sure. But I think it's like really necessary. You don't want to be on all the time. And I feel like so many filmmakers are on all the time and then you just get burnt out. And I feel like that's when you start making work that just isn't connecting or that lose that genuinity. Is that genuinity?
I think that's a word. Genuinity?
Genuinity?
Genuineness?
Genuineness,
sure.
maybe. But
Let us know.
That's when you start to kind of stray from your work and it becomes more like a job and it becomes more technical. So I feel like just allowing myself to, go on walks and watch my little trash TV and journal and read and things that are outside of this space. That's when I start to, really come up with the things that I want to work on. But yeah, I feel like you don't have to be going all the time. You might feel like it because it's so early in your career, but it's not necessary.
Just befriend someone on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. Email them every quarter, work on some cool projects, and you might find yourself on the Forbes 30 list. That's my biggest takeaway of today. So
perfect.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I've had a blast chatting with you. That is a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed listening and or watching. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend, send it in a text message, whatever you got to do. We love talking documentaries, and we'll see you next time. Peace.